What is a business model? It's a term that we hear all the time in entrepreneurship, but it's something that students and new entrepreneurs sometimes have a hard time grasping. It can mean a lot of different things. It can take a lot of different forms, but at its central concept, at the central idea, it is simply, what does the business create? How does it create it? Who does it create it for? How does it reach those people? And how does it get value or revenues from the customers back to the business? So this is all about thinking through all the various aspects of a business. What does it need to run? What does it need to function? How does the money move between the customer and the business, and between the business and their employees or other types of providers? These are the questions that need to be answered with a business model. And you might think, you're not ready to create a business model. What does that even mean? But the good thing is that with evidence-based entrepreneurship, all the aspects of the business model that you start with, they're just hypotheses. And to put it even more simply, they're just guesses. You can make guesses. You're probably going to be wrong anyways, so you may as well recognize that what you're doing is creating an idea of what you think might work, and then you're going to test it. So we use the Lean Business Canvas to start developing those hypotheses of all these different aspects of the business, to then test and then iterate, refine, figure out what works. Steve Blank, who's basically the godfather of entrepreneurship as we now know it, with the lean startup method and all the rest, he says that a startup is a temporary organization in search of a scalable business model. So it's all about finding that business model. It's all about the search for the business model. If you're a startup, your product is not who you are. You think it is, it feels like it is, but it's actually not. Your product is part of your business model, and it's part of the experiment that you'll be testing. So let's break it down into 4 parts of the business model. The first part of the business model is the offering. The offering identifies what it is you are creating for your customers. Also, how does that create value for them? What problems does it solve? What needs does it meet? And finally, how are you going to reach your customers and communicate with them? This is all part of the offering. And this is also a huge part of it is the customer value proposition. This is just a single statement that describes how you create value for your customer. And before you ever pitch, before you really go too far, you need to make sure that you have refined and thought through your customer value proposition, because it is the fundamental core of your business model. The second part of the business model is the customers. Now, do not make the mistake of going too broad on your target market. You have to think through, who are my customers? Who are my early adopters? Who are the people that need my product or my service more than anyone else? Those are your customers. Now, you can save the entire world with your product, but start with your early adopters. Start with people who are going to be most interested. And another key part of the customers that you need to start with, they're the people who can pay for the service. They're the people who are willing to pay. They have the greatest need and the willingness and ability to pay. The third part of the business model is the infrastructure. And this is all of the things that you need to create that value, deliver that product, interact with your customers. So we're talking everything from people, technology, products, suppliers, partners, facilities, buildings, equipment, whatever it is that you need, the stuff and the people, and basically all the things that you're going to have to pay for as costs as a business, or things that you're going to be able to borrow and with in-kind donations, which is really key, especially for nonprofits. That's your infrastructure, and you have to figure it out. You're not going to know exactly what you're going to do at the very beginning, but that's something that you need to keep in mind. The fourth part of the business model is the financial viability. Now, you may want to make millions. You may just want to create a community venture that helps people around you. Now, regardless, whatever you want to do, it has to be financially viable. With for-profit companies, it just really breaks down into two things. One is the revenues. How much money are you bringing in? What's the price of your product? How many people are paying for it? What are your revenues? And the second is the costs. How much does it cost to create your product? How much do you have to pay employees? Are you going to have them on hand even if they're not selling products? How is all that going to work, and how are you going to cover those expenses? So if your costs exceed your revenues, you can get by for a while if you have cash on hand, but usually almost always that means you have to focus on fixing some of those aspects. You have to increase your sales, increase your price, or decrease your costs. We're going to talk a lot about that more, but that just breaks down the business model into 4 parts that then we can go into further depth. So business model, what do you create? How do you find your customers? Who are your customers? And how do you transfer your product to them and their money to you? Right? And the four pieces of the business model are the offering, the customers, the infrastructure, and financial viability. And that is what a business model actually is.